Welcome to the Afterthoughts podcast. Ryan, tell the people what's happening right now.
You know, E, we grew up watching shows like The Office, Parks and Rec. And in those shows, there was always a cold open, like 60 seconds up top, like the opening band to warm you up. Didn't have to have anything to do with the actual episode. It was just like a fun thing up top. We've talked for years about adding cold opens
Always wanted one.
to the Afterthoughts podcast. The problem is when you live in Austin, Texas, a cold open is really hard to come by.
But today, Ryan, we have access to a cold open. Welcome to the Afterthoughts podcast, cold open on the coldest, craziest day you could ever imagine. We are in what is technically right now called a winter storm advisory. And as you can tell, Ryan and I are outside. If you're listening right now, I suggest you get on youtube.com, search Red Rocks Austin, Afterthoughts podcast
Outside
for this episode because we are sitting
inclement weather.
Inclement, unprecedented weather. Ryan and I, you know, if people ever ask us if we're committed to this podcast,
Man, oh man.
may this be proof how committed we are.
E, we are by a snowbank right now.
We risked our
Talking
lives.
to the people.
We risked our lives to come down and film this week's episode in the midst of the storm. Our crew, Kayla and Threethan, also did. Thank you guys. As you can see behind us, this is real snow here in Austin, Texas. It's the last remaining snow on the property midway through the snowstorm day that we could find. The roads are completely dry. It's incredibly dangerous. All of the snow is pretty much gone. It
I would
never
love
got
to
icy.
hear-
It's crazy out here.
I would imagine you're still trying to process this day of snow. How are you doing processing the snow, E?
It will take weeks, Ryan, to unpack living through this storm. Doug is still, unfortunately, digging
He's
himself
snowed
out
in.
up at his house.
He is snowed
He
in.
is trying as hard as he can to get out of his driveway, but there's just so much snow. And yet here we are.
Man.
We're here today. We're going to talk about the mysterious disappearance and arrival of TikTok.
Oh, is it back?
It's back, I guess.
Wow.
We'll
That was quick.
talk a little deeper into this past weekend
Sure.
and changing the world and stories of that and what that looks like. Walking through great times and challenging times, finishing the fast. We got a lot to talk about today, but we wanted to start by acknowledging what everyone is going through, which is this winter storm of epic proportions.
Man, oh man.
It was awesome this morning to get to see my
Fun.
boys walk out.
Oh, yeah,
and
what'd they
see
say?
snow in the backyard. My oldest, Zeke, he came out early. I was sitting out there and got to watch him see it in the backyard. He was so excited. He immediately went right out there, tried to gather some snow in a cup to make a snow cone.
Sure. Yep.
And my 2-year-old Ray had never seen snow in his life.
First time.
Same as Threethan, the chief of this podcast, who also got to experience it, and he loved it, and it's been
Yes.
fun. And then before I came down here, Zeke was like, "Oh, it's all gone,"
Right.
and that was the end of the snow.
Yep.
But nonetheless, we're in a winter storm, and we will persevere, and we will continue this conversation when we are not out here, where hypothermia is a risk.
Is vast.
Welcome to the Afterthoughts podcast. And now we're inside.
Wow.
Just like that, where it is warmer.
Clement weather in here.
Very clement, very precedented.
Precedented.
Yes, precedented circumstances. Feels good to be within shelter at this point in the midst of this winter storm.
Probably 70 degrees in here.
Our prayers continue to go out for Doug, that he will get out
Still hasn't gotten here yet.
of the snow. He's not here. We hope he arrives during this episode. If he doesn't, we're just going to run with this because
Hey.
Afterthoughts has been gaining momentum.
Listen.
A lot of afterthinkers joining. A lot of people demand this every single week. And in the midst of a winter storm and some travel, we knew we had to make an episode.
Yeah, this is what the people need. And I have to say, being on this side of the table, it's an adjustment for me.
It's a big adjustment.
But I'm gonna power through.
You can do it. I want to talk about a couple things, but first, Kayla took a dog sled to get in here today.
Yes.
She went all out
Yeah.
and she made it.
Yes.
And so she's here. Kayla, welcome.
Hey.
How's
Thank
the
you,
storm
Kayla.
been for you? Are you doing okay?
I am thriving right now. Yeah, those dogs, they were speeding down 35 left and right.
And you didn't grow up around snow very much.
I did
Correct.
/ didn't.
Okay, so
I'm a military
So,
kid.
still tough to know.
didn't answer my question.
Well, when I was a kid, yes, and then
growing up.
and then I grew up and I didn't.
Yeah, so
Right.
you didn't. Let's do this again. You didn't grow up seeing snow very much.
Sure, no.
Yes, as a kid when you were growing up.
Yeah,
So-
as a kid, I grew up with snow, but
Where'd you grow up, Kayla? Let's try that.
okay. Kindergarten through 4th grade, Colorado Springs.
Okay, we skipped 0 to kindergarten.
There's just too much in that
Just
one.
moved
I
all
just-
around.
Yeah,
Kayla,
moved
I just
around.
want you to know that I resonate with everything that's happening
Thank
right now
you.
because I also grew up
Yeah,
moving around a
bouncing
ton.
around.
Wow.
Ethan just lived in Colorado his
Yeah.
whole life.
Yeah,
so it's
sorry.
a very black and white thing for him.
If anyone out there wants to start a support group for people that moved around and aren't sure how much
Yeah.
snow they had as a child, Kayla would love to join with Ryan.
Yeah.
Okay,
Do you want me
so
to add up
You
all
moved
the
around a
inches?
lot, and then kindergarten, you moved to where?
Kindergarten to 4th grade,
Right.
Colorado Springs.
So there was a lot of snow.
There was a lot of snow.
Oh, okay.
I loved that. And then I moved to Pennsylvania.
Okay.
We had
also have snow there.
a lot of snow there. We
All
had
right.
at one point like 3 feet. And I was only there for a year, and we got 3 feet.
So
one
far, a
time.
lot of snow.
So,
on the trail.
A lot of snow.
So, Kayla, as someone who
then
grew up
Georgia.
around a lot of snow.
And then Georgia
okay.
for middle and high school, Georgia.
right.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe we can make a MoGraph of a map of Kayla's life here.
Kayla's journey.
I am sorry. I assumed because your family now lives in South
Yes.
Carolina.
They're getting
that-
snow too.
Are they really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've been tracking the weather a lot.
And my parents, who live in Atlanta now,
Yeah.
sent us a picture last week of it snowing in
They
Georgia.
got snow last week?
Mhm.
Wow.
Let me try this.
Yeah.
What I was trying to get at
Okay.
is you have a real joy and excitement about snow.
I do, yeah.
I thought that's because you weren't around it a lot as a kid, but I think it's just that you love snow is what I'm
I do.
finding out.
Yeah.
Last night when it started snowing, how did you feel?
I
Could have made this a lot easier and just done that.
No,
part.
you're okay.
Sorry.
The people need to know, I guess, a
Yeah.
little bit of a
It's
background.
good to get some origin story of Kayla from Questions
Yeah,
with
this is
Kayla.
kind of like
So
a lot of people have
Mufasa.
been asking.
It's like an origin story.
Yeah.
Of Questions with Kayla.
Wow.
There you go.
Talk about that movie.
Or
Have
Wicked.
you seen that yet?
Not yet.
All right, you and Doug need to
But I
see it so
will.
we can do an episode and talk about that for. You didn't like it?
No.
Guys,
It was
don't,
okay.
don't spoil
Sorry.
it for me.
Wow.
It was okay.
I liked it.
Oh, okay. I forgot the question.
Last
When
night,
you saw the snow last night.
yes. Last
tell
night
us
was great.
how you're feeling.
I was texting Ethan Ormeo, and we were thriving. He
Wow.
had never really seen snow, and
This was your first time ever seeing snow,
Yeah.
Threethan.
he is shaking his head yes.
Pretty excited.
Yeah, what are your thoughts so far?
I love it.
Blew
Cool.
your mind.
Yes.
So anyway, there's a couple minutes down talking about this weather a little further. Kayla, do you have any questions for us? Now that
I
I've asked
do.
you, done a poor job of asking you questions.
That's okay. It's okay.
Yes,
Now
forgive
we
me.
know.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why it's not questions with Ethan.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Yes.
true. Okay. I have a few questions.
Oh, that's the bit.
One question is from AJ Norman. She was on the
Oh, boy.
podcast, if anybody remembers.
Celebrity question coming in.
Yes. So she said,
Celeb shot.
yes, if you had to cheer for a team in the national championship or Super Bowl, would you rather cheer for Ohio State or the Chiefs?
So
Wow.
it's a very good question.
Huh?
And by very good, I mean pretty evil question to ask.
Very, very bad. I've hated both my whole life.
Yeah, there's a lot here.
Maybe I just walk away from sports at that point.
Wow.
I'm trying to think of a team that Ohio State could play that I would root for them, and I can't think of one. Like, I know in the NFL, the Chiefs, there's no one I would rather.
I think, but
Lose to
my
the Chiefs.
disdain for the Chiefs
Yeah.
is more.
Yeah, because they're a direct rival of our team.
Right.
So I guess
It has to be Ohio State.
All
But that's
right.
just a really harsh way to make us say that.
There
And
you go.
and no congratulations to them on winning the national
Yeah.
championship, because who cares?
Womp womp. And then on a similar note,
Jeez, it's heavy. We're in
Okay.
a winter storm right now. If maybe we could have
Yeah.
kind of a softball question.
Little levity, maybe.
well, this is like kind of just to make you think. Do you think
Huh?
a college football team's best team could beat an NFL's worst team if they played each other?
No.
I remember
So,
being in fifth grade having this debate at a lunch table in
Wow.
the cafeteria. And it was a pretty heated debate. And then I put aside my peanut butter sandwich and I spoke up and I said, listen, an NFL team is made out of the best players from every single college football team. And so although it would seem watching on Saturday and Sunday that it's the same level, it's not the same level. And so the answer is no.
There you go.
That's
Even the
correct
worst
answer.
NFL team is so high above anything than we can really.
Yeah, the 0-16 Lions would still have beat any college team that year.
There you
That's
go.
the reality of it.
It is.
But thank you for asking.
Yep.
Now you know.
Okay. And now, here's a crazy one.
Oh boy.
I want to know your thoughts. What do you think of this whole tickety talk thing?
That's a crazy question. I never thought I'd get asked that in my lifetime.
Okay, first off, I just found out when we were by that snowbank that it's back. Can one of you give me like a brief overview of what's happened?
Really, it was quite a drift of snow. It's like
Yeah.
overwhelming. I'm surprised we
Yeah.
were able to get inside and climb over
Yeah.
that.
Well, what we know is Saturday night, TikTok got shut down.
Yep.
And I believe it was from Congress that shut it down or someone. Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And
It's
Shut it
passed
down.
through the the government's been all
from
and
the
what
government.
was the main reason? Is it that it's bad for us, or
No, I think it was just like to stop.
that
it's China
China's
controlled.
spying?
It's because they
Yep.
China owns it, controls it, and what are they doing
Yes.
with it?
So it wasn't okay.
No, it wasn't
it.
for the mental health.
Okay,
No. We would never prioritize that.
no,
It's
No.
because that's how it feels to me. Is like they tried to make something like, hey, this would be good for us as a society, and then 24 hours later, they're like, nah, no,
everyone's
let's not.
freaking out.
We don't know
Yeah.
how to sit with ourselves in silence. We got to give it back.
No. Keep them
That's how it feels
doom scrolling.
Yeah.
to me. And if that was the case, I would obviously not be a fan of that. But I'm sure there's so much to this topic that I know nothing about. So Ethan, take it away.
I think it would be great if TikTok disappeared, but I'm also very extreme when it comes to social media.
Remember,
I
we're
don't
on
think-
TikTok.
Huh?
We have the Afterthoughts.podcast on TikTok.
Right.
So
And if
How's
you
that
can't
doing?
beat them, join them, I guess. But
we have 1,000 followers, so follow us on TikTok.
Okay.
yeah, sure.
There you
Now
go.
that it's back. And it is now back active, and now Trump is going to delay the ban on it, and they're going to try to figure it out and maybe get a U.S. buyer to come in and all kinds of stuff going on. It's all economics and spying, basically. But
Right.
it was funny. I was talking to a guy in the lobby Saturday night, and he was being very hilarious but honest about how he kind of had freaked out when he went to get on. He's like, "Whoa!"
Yeah.
And he jokingly but not jokingly was like, my thought was, "What am I going to do right now?
Yeah.
Like, what do I do when this go-to vice is not there?" And then he said, and then I felt checked. He's like, "What if the Bible app disappeared? I wouldn't freak out at all." And that felt like a check in my life that I wouldn't even probably notice for a while.
Yeah.
But TikTok's gone and I'm freaked out immediately.
And to take that a step further, like usually what happens is we laugh at the, like cue the laughter, yeah, and then change nothing.
And then you're back on TikTok.
So like I would really challenge if somebody was checked by that story, like actually think about it. Actually think about making a shift in your life. Actually think about putting it down for a couple of weeks. I'll say this, that every single year, my favorite part of the fast is not being on Instagram.
Mhm.
Like the fast is always great and hard and all of that in all these different ways. The social media element of it, of being off it, is just so good. Once you get past the first couple of days or first couple of hours, maybe for a few people, you start to realize like, oh, I'm like back existing with real people in real time, having real conversations. And I feel like at peace.
Yeah. It's, I think we're at the point with social media where it's just becoming clearer and clearer that the pros do not outweigh the cons.
Right.
There's more studies of mental health, the effects on especially young people, teenagers, the disconnection that's happening.
Yeah.
It's, I think it's a great premise to try to connect the world. We need that. We need human connection. But I think we're past the point where that's what social media is doing for the most part. There's always going to be good stories and things that happen because of it, because God can work through anything. But I think that what you just said, people that maybe have been fasting social media, or you had that gut check of TikTok's gone and I don't know what to do with my time, or there's probably some people that for that night were like, this is kind of nice. Yeah. They're like, I'm doing other things. There's a lot of things that we enter into a fast. It's funny that fasting is really about food, but for some reason deciding to fast makes you want to just change up a bunch of things in your life. Yeah. So I was reading Romans last night, and one of the most famous parts is Romans chapter 12. And it starts with saying, offer your body as a living sacrifice, which is what fasting is.
Yeah.
God, I'm offering my body as a living sacrifice to you. Verse 2 is, do not be conformed to the patterns of this world. but rather be transformed by the renewing of your mind, right? Let God's word renew your mind. And I haven't ever felt those two verses click together as much as I did last night, being in the midst of a 21-day fast, realizing I am way less conformed to the pattern of this world right now than normal because I have offered my body as a living sacrifice. And I feel so much more spiritually full, so much more clear. Like, it's kind of crazy when your brain shouldn't be working as well when you're fasting, but it actually feels sharper is a indicator light that there's normal practices in your life and things that are keeping your brain from being able to be sharp and clear. And so I think a lot of people in this time experience that I'm not being conformed by the world as much because I put social media aside, because I don't watch TV 7 nights a week. I've been reading, I've been in scripture, I've been more focused in my faith. Please take that with you. That's what I want to do, is take these things and with me for 12 months, not just for 21 days.
That's so good, man. Yeah, TikTok is a pattern of the world. And so scrolling through it is conforming to the patterns of the world. I love that connection.
And the question is, can you, like with things that maybe aren't inherently sinful,
Right.
can you do those in a way that they don't conform you to the pattern of the world, which is a world that is numb, which is a world that is antisocial, that is isolated, a world that is angry, a world that is distracted, a world that is whatever. Can you be on TikTok but not become that way?
Yeah.
And if you can't, then it's probably an indicator that that's a vice. That's what it's become. So I'll say something that will shock you, shock everybody in my life. I decided in this time that I'm going to retire from fantasy football.
Whoa.
I know. It's a big decision for me. I've been playing fantasy football since I was in high school.
You love fantasy football
Whoa.
more than anybody I've ever met.
Yes. And that's the problem. So last year when I finished playing fantasy football, and I love fantasy football, I'm a huge sports guy. This is for me. This is my convictions. I'm not putting this on anybody else or the guys in my league. I'm about to send them a announcement. Last year when I finished the season in 2023, I got to the end of the season. I was like, what did I just do? And there's such a great element to my fantasy football league, especially the one that I made with a bunch of buddies from all over the place that I've played with over the years, because of the connection that it creates. And we have a lot of fun and, you know, good friendships and keep up with guys that you don't talk to. And that's a great way to do that. So
Which is a lot of what it is.
Which is, in most leagues, that's how it is. I got to the end of that season, and putting that part aside, I thought I just spent way more hours on this than I did any spiritual discipline, any ways of growing myself as a person. And I also looked back and realized there's Sundays where my wife knows that I'm in a bad mood, and it's because some guy I'll never meet didn't score enough points for me.
A made-up team.
For a made-up team.
Still counts for you, but it doesn't actually
it's not
count.
Real. That's why it's called fantasy football. Right. And the thing that has gotten to me the most, and this year confirmed it, there was a day where Kayla's husband, Logan, made a very controversial trade. And so our group text was just going crazy, and we're all like giving Logan crap, and poor guy didn't deserve it. But we're all talking. And while that was going on, I had one-on-one time with my son, Ray, and we were at the park. We went for a walk, and I got home from that and realized I was not really present with him for almost any of that. And how he's only going to be this age once. Like, there's so many things that I've realized because I've let this become a vice in my life, that it's distracting me and keeping me from what really matters. And then the last thing I'll say about it as a sports fan is I don't really watch many games anymore just to watch the game. I'm stressed the whole time about one guy that my team, that I have or my opponent has. And I want to get back to just enjoying watching games and not stressing, and only stressing about my teams and hoping they win and stuff. So that's a very inherently non-sinful thing. It's a fun game to play with your friends and go do it.
Yes.
But for me, this fast has revealed it has become a vice in my life that I can't handle in a healthy way, and conforms me into being a distracted dad and a distracted husband. And so because of that, I felt like God was like, hey, we're getting to every vice in your life, and this is one, so you got to offer it up. So I'm giving it up.
I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. Am I Brett Favre? Will I one day come back? Maybe, if I think I could play and it would just be for fun. Yeah. I'm too competitive to do that. I can't do it. Yeah. So that's the takeaway from this fast.
This is like a big moment live on air. Ethan Matott is hanging up the cleats.
Wow.
He's putting the fantasy football jersey in the rafters. He's calling it a career. You've won several championships
Not
over
as
your
many
time.
as you'd think, but I've tried hard.
I know that because we've won together multiple times.
Yes, we have.
And it is time for you to retire.
It's time to retire. Get back to being a sports fan who just watches the games and enjoys it, and can also have a Sunday when I'm not emotionally tied to some people I'll never meet.
I'll tell you this.
I need that.
It's really nice not playing fantasy football.
I bet. I'm
Especially
gonna find out.
like we both have a lot of decisions we have to make constantly.
Yeah.
And so you get to a point where you're like, wait, why am I putting more decisions on my plate to make?
Yeah.
That's like, I already have too many.
Yeah, I'll
And
be
so-
sitting in a service and I'm stressed. I'm like, gosh,
Yeah.
do I play this guy or this guy? You know, like, and you just get so distracted by something.
Yeah.
You know, I just remembered actually, you said something once that stuck with me about fantasy football. Then you didn't mean it at all as a critique or any sort of like call out. It's just funny the way you said it. I think you came to my house on a Sunday when I had the TV on, a laptop open, and my phone with multiple screens of my leagues, and was like on Red Zone, tracking everything and whatever. And you're like, man, you said something like, I love how much you love the dopamine hits of fantasy football or something like that. But I've realized that is a very real thing.
Oh yeah.
You get that notification, you see your score go up like that. Something in my brain has now gotten tied to that. So anyway, that's a whole tangent about fantasy football, but it is an example of something extreme, I feel like, or what feels like an extreme thing, maybe to somebody else, that I feel like I have to do. And to tie that back to social media, I think social media, fantasy football has been my social media.
Yeah.
It's become the thing that has distracted me and numbed me and kept me absent in a lot of ways.
Yeah, you got off social media years ago to double down on
to double down on, literally, that's why I did it. Also because it was 2020 and I was so tired of everyone having so many opinions. But that's one thing that's coming from, a lot is coming from this fast. It's been so rich and so good. And
I think that's a good teaching and takeaway of like, you get into the fast with the big obvious things. And then somewhere along the road of 21 days, you start to see some less obvious things that, to your point, fantasy football is not wrong.
Yeah.
But it is bad when you take a good thing and make it an ultimate thing.
Yeah.
Then you all of a sudden have a problem. Social media is like the prime example of taking a good thing, connecting with people, hearing news, being able, there's grandparents out there who that's the only way that they can see their
Family
grandkids
connections.
or whatever. There's good to it, but when good becomes an ultimate thing, then you've got a problem with it.
Yeah.
And the problem is it's designed to become an ultimate thing in your life because it's so addicting. And TikTok is the ultimate example of that. Instagram's not far behind. And honestly, YouTube now with YouTube Shorts is right there in the same category. And so I had a moment, obviously not on social media, but I use YouTube during this fast because it's helpful with songs, it's helpful with sermons, whatever. But I clicked on a short it was a podcaster talking about something, and then I scrolled to the next one, and then I watched another one, and then it took me like 5 minutes to realize like, oh, I'm doing the same thing. This is social media.
Just
so
on
I
a
had to put
different
that
app.
down and whatever. But it's crazy how quickly
Yeah.
good things can become ultimate things. And so I think if you're listening to this and you're still in the fast, a great question for the last week is, Lord, as we move forward and we exit out of the fast, is there something like a permanent change that you're calling me to make? Is it something radical? Like stopping fantasy football is for E. It's a great question.
And make that decision now. I talked to one of the guys from my league already about this because he's going to do the same thing. And he was like, I have to decide now before it's the summer and the draft's coming up because I know I'll talk my way back into it. And I think that when we're in a more extreme time, like during a fast, we think like, well, yeah, I feel that way right now, but let's get back to normal life and then decide. Don't do that. Because when you get back to normal life, you won't decide to make uncompromising decisions. You will compromise and conform to the pattern of the world.
Yeah.
So if there are things sticking out during a fast, this is the exact time to decide it now. And then remind yourself when you're in a place where you want to grab at that dopamine hit or you want to talk yourself back. No, I decided that when I was in a really spiritually clear place. I think that's an important thing to make. Transitioning that into talking a little bit about discipleship, sanctification, and world change. That's what we talked about this past weekend.
Phenomenal sermon, by the way.
Thank you.
Crushed it.
It felt like a very intense weekend or time for me. First of all, we're in a fast. And I was driving on Tuesday morning, Tuesday before the weekend of preaching that sermon, in the middle of a fast. And I was just like, Holy Spirit, like, I need you to partner with me. Like my brain doesn't feel like it can put this together, have ideas, but I can't get them to fit. And then I corrected myself like a minute later on the drive. And I just said, actually, I'm going to partner with you. So you come up with this,
Ooh.
you give it to me. I will simply be a vessel to share what I believe you are downloading to me. And I always feel like we have to diminish like spiritual seeming things we say. And I don't want to do that because I just think it's important for people to see when you're in a time of going after God, he's just going to do cool things. I was driving home that same day and that sermon just downloaded 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, boom, boom. Like it just aligned. And I got home and just wrote down everything I could. And it was like the easiest sermon prep week I've had.
Yeah.
It downloaded the outline. The next day I went and fleshed it out and that was that. And I was ready for it.
That was Tuesday night. You texted me Tuesday night.
Yeah.
And it was one of those moments where I was just like, oh, it's there. It's just it. You got it.
It doesn't normally happen like that.
Because it's usually like us going back and forth like 20 times with each other. Like, how do you see this? You
This
see
word
that?
and
You see
whatever.
that?
Yeah.
You just had it. It was awesome.
Got my notes to Kayla for slides on Wednesday, which also
That's
rarely
clutch.
ever happens. But that sermon that's like a life sermon for me. So there's a lot of, I've seen the power of that in my life, being invited into the Great Commission. And then Saturday night, came off stage after the 4, and you started walking back with me, and I didn't really know why. 2 of our other friends came with and went backstage, and then you let me know that our friend John had passed away, which I talked a little bit about in the sermon, and Doug had found out, and he shared a little bit about John up in Denver, and that intensified it even more for me.
Yeah.
I sat in my car on Saturday night after both services were over, and I felt this kind of like anguish that I feel like I read in the letters of Paul, that I hear in the voice of Jesus when he's talking to crowds of people, of like, God, there's so many people that don't care. And I don't mean that as an indictment against people in a way of like, how could you not? I was there. I've been that guy that like can show up to church and hear about the gospel and the Great Commission and walk back out like, cool, where are we going to dinner? Like it can be just noise, or I'm just not ready for it. And so I know people will all come in a different place. But it just felt like such an intense combination of so many things going on, where I feel like we're in a revival. We're in the middle of a fast. I should say I see that we are in a revival. I don't feel like it, like we're in it. We're in the middle of a fast where it just feels like our church and so many people are right now just charged up, feeling the Holy Spirit move. Mm. And then life and death hits you all over again. Yeah. And you realize how real all of this is. And it makes decisions like fantasy football seem so small, but so important at the same time to me, because I think like we have such a world that wants to numb us and get us to conform, to just go to sleep. Like that's what especially American culture is to just give you enough comfort and put a blanket over you of streaming and scrolling, and just get you to kind of live a life of not doing a whole lot and just feel. That's what the enemy is really good at in our culture. And you have to fight so hard to care. You have to fight so hard to care about the gospel and wanting to share it with other people and live out that mission. That is going to cost you, and it's not going to be easy. And this is the time right now when you're in a fast. This is the time when you come up for air. Breathe the heavenly things in that you got to take with you to keep fighting, because otherwise it's so easy to get lulled back to sleep. And so all of that to say that this sermon felt to me almost like a rally cry to our church. And Paul says it like, I'm pleading with you. I'm pleading with you to hear the gospel. I'm pleading with you to put your faith in Jesus. I'm pleading with you to care about this because it matters so much. And as people who are often blinded to that, myself included, I felt like that's what I wanted, is to just give a plea to our church of how much this stuff matters.
I love every bit of that. I think the call you gave at the end you gave the salvation call, which is always beautiful and the best decision people can make. And then you put people on the spot and said, if you're ready to be a disciple, raise your hand. Mm-hmm. And I really loved that invitation of like, you saw some people looking around like, oh yeah, I think I do want to do that. Was that intentional, or was that in the moment thing?
I think it was at the 4 p.m. It kind of just happened where I felt like that group's in here too. And I need to address them, because I remember very poignant moments in my life where I needed to be invited into being a disciple of Jesus, because I always felt unworthy. I was the guy sitting in the back like, I can't possibly be me. I can't go change the world for Jesus because of my past. And there were important moments with Sam and Brandon, our small group leaders, going, you need to go start a group. You need to go make some disciples. And our college pastor, Bill, more so in a call out of like, hey, you've got something on your life. You can lead people. but you have to decide to do this. You're going to have to say goodbye to some things. You're going to have to stop conforming to the patterns of the world and the things you want to do and pay a price here. But I see for you that God's going to use your life. Commissioning moments that have been really important in my life. When Doug and I led that freshman small group, this is very much like the wild at heart like phase, which was so good and rich for us, is just like, be crazy with your faith. Like Crazy Faith, Francis Chan, another great book. Yeah. We got all those freshmen at the very end of the school year.
Crazy Love is Francis Chan.
Crazy
Faith is Mike Todd. Both great books.
Good correction, yes. And Multiply is Francis Chan, great book about being a disciple.
Great. And Radical is David Platt.
And
also
Radical
great.
is David Platt, and not a fan. Okay, so that was that era of those books though, right? And so after the whole school year it was funny, this freshman small group was, I showed up expecting like, all we're going to talk about is partying. Like that's what college guys do, right? And we're all struggling with that. These guys were mainly—
How many nights did you go out this week?
Right.
If you got it down from last week, we're on the right track.
Most of these guys were engineers, and their biggest struggle was school not becoming an idol for them, and like how much they had to put into school.
They show up and meet you.
I was like, I don't think that I'm suited for this.
Nerds.
Yeah, totally. But it became this really amazing year, and we built bonds with these guys. And it was the first time where I had some experiences like, hey, instead of what I want to do tonight, this dude needs someone to hang out, so I'm going to go pick him up and we're going to go talk. First time doing stuff like that. Yeah. The very last time we met, we had told them to prepare sort of a manifesto, like, this is the man that I want to be. And we drove him up the mountain on Flagstaff, and we all stood on a rock, and every single guy shared, this is the man of God that I want to go be. That was a really important moment, right? It's a commissioning moment for those guys where other guys around them go, hey, you made a choice tonight. Not only are we here to cheer you on and be accountable for that, but you now know just that same kind of mentality of like, I'm going to try to talk you out of this. So when you decide it, you chose it. Yeah. You've made this decision tonight. So those have been really important moments for us. We've received like blessings and words from people throughout, like, this is who you guys are. This is what you're called to do. Don't look back. Yeah. And I wanted to give some people that opportunity in the room, because I think there are a lot of faithful disciples who show up week in and week out, and they're all for the salvation and the new people. That's why they're here, and they love it, and they're growing and, being built in their faith too. But it's important for them to feel those moments too of like, hey, and you are an audience that needs to be called up, because we need you to go out there and do this. And there was a ton of people who put a hand up to go, I want to go live that in this city, which was really encouraging.
It was cool to see.
Yeah.
I've got a theology question for you. The piece that I loved and also challenge and just want to see if we can dig into is, you said, don't fall into the trap of thinking that sanctification and discipleship are the same thing, or something around there. I love that. I love the heart behind it, and I think I agree with it, but I also don't agree with it at another level.
Disagreements. Live on the Afterthoughts podcast.
Because so if you're new to the terminology that we're using, we would say that salvation is the moment that you put your faith in Jesus and you get saved. But then you enter into a lifelong process of sanctification, which is becoming more like Jesus. And so the goal of sanctification is to be more and more restored into the image of God, become more like Jesus. And to me, and so what goes into that sanctification bucket is typically like the prayer and the fasting and the read your Bible and all of the spiritual practices. But the goal of sanctification is to be like Jesus. And what did Jesus do? Jesus was constantly out evangelizing and constantly out healing people and constantly out making disciples. Yes. And so I think sanctification, when I think of sanctification, I think of the whole thing. And that to me is what discipleship is. Yeah. And so makes sense. I would love to hear your thoughts of how you parse that out.
Yeah. And maybe there's a redemption of that word, because hearing you explain that makes a lot of sense. Sanctification in my mind, and maybe this is kind of our cultural take on it rather than what it actually means, tends to always to me be spiritual formation. So it's just the reading your Bible, spending time with God, prayer. The inner work is how I would describe what I tend to think of when I think sanctification. So maybe a better way to say what I said would have been, spiritual formation is not all of discipleship. Yeah. Because, and you can make the argument that, well, you're being spiritually formed by serving and all that. So it's semantics of language, I guess. But all that to say, maybe what I was trying to get at is discipleship involves the inner work and the outpouring of the Great Commission.
100%.
And I think in Western Christianity, we pretty much mainly just make it out to be the inner work part. If you go to church, and you read your Bible
Yeah.
and you pray, which are all crucial foundational things, but then you've kind of, that's a relationship with Jesus. And yes, but also you're missing out on what I believe is the best part. And that is watching what he's doing in you affect people outside of you. And that's what the disciples were doing as disciples all the time, is they would spend time with Jesus, but then they'd go and be sent to pray for people, feed people, whatever. And then ultimately on the grand scale, the book of Acts is them as disciples going and pouring their whole lives out to preach the good news and tell people about Jesus, make them into disciples, baptize them, raise up leaders to go and help make more disciples.
Totally.
So I get what you mean. And maybe there was a better way I could have said that. But yeah, if sanctification is the whole bit, it's just becoming more like Jesus, then let's reclaim the part of it that is making disciples.
Which is oftentimes that outer work is the stuff that gets neglected. And personality type comes into play here, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
like for me personally, I am the person that needs to hear this, because the spiritual formation aspect of it, the inner work comes that's like, I love that stuff.
Yeah.
Like silent retreat, sign me up.
Mhm.
You know, like work through the inner stuff. Like let's go, let's sit in prayer and let's be silent. Let's wait for the Lord. Go evangelize. That gets me excited and also very nervous.
Yeah.
Like I have to like really pump myself up. I do it because I know that it's part of it and because it's part of the life of Jesus, but that part doesn't come nearly as naturally to me. And so for those of you out there who are maybe wired like me, I think it's really important that we realize that this is not just about the inner work. The inner work is to get us ready for the outer work.
Yeah.
And ultimately this is about going and making disciples, which requires going and talking to real people about Jesus. We have we're doing a staff like competition in January where it's like bingo and there's all these different like, so it's like sit in silence for 10 minutes, you know, read your Bible, journal, and that stuff. I'm just like boom, boom, boom. And then there's one that says, talk to a stranger about Jesus.
Yeah.
And I saw that and I went, oh no.
Yeah.
Okay, I got a month to do this. I got to hype myself up. You know what I mean?
You know what's funny about that is that has, because I'm competitive and I want to black out the bingo board and help our team, that has changed how I've been going to public places. And it's another thing that's like, well, I'm in this competition. I'm like, oh, but I should be doing this all the time. Like
All the time.
I'm standing in Target the other day to make a return and this lady's standing over there. And so I just start making conversation with her just in hopes that maybe,
Here we go.
which is kind of sad that in my mind, it's like, so I can check that box when really it should be so that this lady hears the gospel, but praying for opportunities where I'm like, when I show up here, God, would you just open up a conversation with somebody that I get to share you with them, and realizing that should be the life that I live all the time, because it is intimidating. And I don't think that making disciples and evangelism is always being the guy on the street corner with the sign about Jesus. That's not everybody's that type of evangelist.
Right.
And Paul even says some plant seeds, some water, right? Like there's parts of the discipleship journey that you make. It's kind of like finding ways to get uncomfortable, but also finding the things that do come naturally to you, where if somebody was in a coffee shop next to you and they're like, hey, what are you doing? And you just tell them, I'm writing this book. What's it about? Boom. That's going to turn into a
We're
whole
into it.
conversation. But praying for those opportunities, I'm like, well, that's something I should take with me everywhere I go. Because ultimately, when you finally get to share with somebody out of nowhere the gospel, and they'll say something like, wow, I hadn't thought of that, or I've been looking for a church, or dude, thank you, I haven't really thought about God in some years, but I've been meaning, like that. Those kinds of moments are right there.
There's nothing better.
The harvest is plentiful, right? Like it's ripe out there. So I feel like the church, especially in the West, needs a little bit of a kick back into that evangelistic side, because most people, some of it has to do with being an introvert or an extrovert, have a bent towards, I'm more of the spiritual formation guy.
Right.
I would rather go hang out and talk to people. And I have had to fight over the years to really value quiet time and being with God and being in silence and not accomplishing anything, not doing anything, not going out to achieve the mission. Because I've done that in times where I remember being on my 6th mission trip in 6 months when I was a missions pastor, so burnt out that I didn't want to be there and didn't have anything in the tank to give to anybody. Because at some point you run out of gas if all you do to get filled up is pour out and pour out and pour out. Like you've got to have both. And so maybe that's helpful language for people that are trying to figure out this journey with Jesus, going, oh, I'm one of those people that I'd be content to always just stay home and grow closer with God. And I love that and value that. And I think that's what my relationship with is supposed to be. Great.
Yeah.
Pray for opportunities to pour that out. Yeah. And if you're somebody that finds yourself always wanting to be out on the streets and share the gospel and whatever that looks like, challenge yourself to go spend some time with God, because he doesn't want you to neglect your own spiritual journey in that process, because you'll be healthier and you'll be better for the people you share with.
It's both. It's always been both.
Yes.
That's great.
That's the point I was trying to make.
Yeah. I no longer think you're a heretic.
Well,
So
that's-
that's a great explanation.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, when did the Great Commission click for you? When did it go from another thing maybe you read in the Bible to like, oh, I got to do that?
So my freshman year of college, you were a sophomore, Doug was a junior, was this pivotal year for all of us. But really it was like we were starting to read the Bible for the first time. You and I remember we went through Acts together.
Oh, yeah.
And we're like texting each other back and forth. But it was the basics. We were starting from the very beginning. Well, that summer I went to Costa Rica and was there for like 3 months leading mission trips. And so we went down, there's like a staff of 20 people, and then all these high schoolers would come down from all over the country, and we would take them out to different places. And so it was my first like role as like ministry leader, which I was not ready for at all, but I've always been like so grateful that they gave me the opportunity.
Didn't feel ready.
I wasn't, because God does not call the qualified.
Boom.
He qualifies the
We
qualified.
said that a few times to each other in college.
And it was very true.
Yeah.
Still is today.
Very.
So we get there and I'm so new to all of this that like I don't even know. There's a night where we're all going to share our testimonies, and I'd never done that before. And they put all the names in the hat, and I was just like, just as long as it's not me, I can hear somebody do this, and then I'll know what to do.
Yeah.
And then they pick my name first out of the hat, and I just like draw a blank, and I go. And so
That's
Delin,
awesome.
the guy who runs it, who he looks at me and he goes, "Tell us how you grew up." And I was like, "Okay, I get it. I just tell my story."
Yeah.
Going into it.
So I grew up moving around a lot. So I saw some
Some
snow. I didn't see too much snow.
Not a whole lot of snow.
She's tuned us out. She's on TikTok.
Yeah, that was a snowback, a callback to snow.
Wow, nice.
Snow way.
Snow way. So the second day, Delin sits us all down before all the students get there, and he goes, "Hey, I'm going to walk you through all of the things we're going to teach the kids along the way." And then he goes, "So obviously the first sermon is all about Matthew 28. Everyone turn to Matthew 28." And everyone's like, "Yeah, of course, of course, of course." And I'm sitting there like, "What's in Matthew
What are you
28?
doing here?
Wonder what's coming up."
Yeah.
And he goes into this story of Jesus post-resurrection gathering the disciples together and saying, "All authority on heaven and earth has been given to me. Now, therefore, go and make disciples, baptizing them," and the rest of it. And he goes, "So this is like really important, right, guys?" And I'm sitting there like, yeah, this is like everything.
Yes.
So you're telling me that Jesus gave us like our marching orders, right? Like post-resurrection right
Yes.
before.
Yes.
And it's a job that is going to last for the rest of our lives and the rest of our existence until he comes back. Like, we should tell everyone about this, And I'm sitting there and my mind is just like blown while everyone's hearing something they've heard a thousand times, And so I remember that moment. That moment is like marked in my soul, because I then like was nervous about these kids coming down, and something shifted and was like, no, I'm not nervous about this. It's just my job to teach them the way of Jesus and help them practice the way of Jesus. Like, oh, I can do that. Like, let's go make some disciples. And so to me, the Great Commission, although it's this crazy, wild, huge task, it actually simplifies my life tremendously. It takes away a lot of my worry and a lot of my like, especially like performance anxiety. Like, am I doing enough? Am I reading my Bible enough? Am I smart enough? Am I preaching well enough? And like all of that, like, am I enough? It's like, no, stop. Are you teaching people and showing people how to be like Jesus?
Yeah.
And if you're doing that, and you said that this week, and if really you have one person that you're discipling, like, your life is a crazy success.
Yeah.
And you should be like really proud of the disciples that you're making.
It's the beauty of the architecture of Matthew's gospel to me, and all four gospels end with a commissioning moment. But for him, like, if you read it with a blank slate, you are introduced to Jesus, and then these guys show up, and they all are you, right? As you're reading about them, you're like, oh, I resonate with that guy. I'm like that guy, or whatever. And you watch Jesus working and hear what he says, and then it would be a real shock if you had a blank slate to find out that he gets crucified. and to find out that he rises from the grave, right?
Yeah.
But you'd read this amazing story and you'd be left with, like you are at the end of any great story or something like that, what do I do with this?
Yeah.
And the last 4 verses are the call to action that Jesus leaves them with after all of this. And there's so many things you'll read, like Sermon on the Mount and the Gospel of Matthew, you're like, that changes everything about my life and I've got to figure all this stuff out. But it gets so simplified at the very end where he goes, in light of this crazy cool story of what God just did, here's your marching orders. Here's your call to action. And I remember in college, for a while, I thought Matthew 10 was the Great Commission. I think one of you guys corrected me on that because I was like, yeah, when Jesus told him not to take anything with him, and they go and try to like, that's what it is. And it was like, no, later he says you probably should take some stuff with you because it's gonna be your life now, not like a little mission trip kind of thing.
It's okay to plan.
But once exactly. Once I finished the Gospel of Matthew, I remember reading that, and it was at a very critical time in my life where I was trying to decide my future. I'm also a very simple, logical person, and it felt like the light bulb just went on of like, oh, there's my answer. That's what I'm supposed to do with my life, and read it very literally of, I guess I'm supposed to go and travel and make disciples. And so that turned into what we did for a year and led into ministry and all that stuff.
Yeah, we called that the AC project, which stood for the Acts Commission, which was us taking the Great Commission and going, but see, the book of Acts is those guys actually doing that. And so we should go they're kind of commissioning us to go do the same thing. We thought it was so creative. But it was just us going, this is our attempt to do the Great Commission.
We're not going to just read it and be hearers of the word. We're going to do it. And what I love about the whole thread of the story is, and Luke writes this, he writes his own gospel and the book of Acts, is he tells the whole story where you hear it and you're given the commission, and then you watch real people go live it out.
Yeah.
Historically validated, like what they did and who they were and how they died and all of that stuff. You watch real human beings who just simply walked with Jesus as disciples and started to become a little bit more like him. Yeah. Go live it out. And that to us, I remember so many times texting or talking about the book of Acts, like, I can't believe this. Because we didn't know it. We didn't know the story. We didn't know where the church came from. Why are there churches on every corner, right? Like, I had all those questions. Where'd this all come from? And then you read their story and you're like, oh my gosh, this group of guys stood up against the Sanhedrin and then the Roman Empire, and their faith outlasted it. And they all got killed. And they have these crazy stories. And then the Apostle Paul comes in, which is to me the most wild, miraculous testimony of all of this guy who was persecuting the church, experiences the resurrection, like the validity of the gospel to me through his life. As the guy who had every attempt to try to tear it down, that suddenly is telling the people that he's testifying as a prisoner in front of the guys he used to be on the Sanhedrin with, going, hey, so I know it was like not that long ago I was with you guys. I have something crazy to tell you. They're right. Jesus actually did rise from the grave. I experienced it. I've seen him resurrected, and I've watched what he's done through my life. Reading the book of Acts for us was like, okay, that's it. The Great Commission is possible. It happened. It's changed the world. We know about Jesus because of the obedience of those guys to it. So let's go try it too. And in the end, that's my hope of asking our church, do you want to go change the world? Is that people lock into the mission and realize how fun it is in the midst of challenges and prices that you pay, that it is truly the abundant life Jesus wants for us. And I hope, and so many more people will step into that with us.
Yeah, and it's happening, man. And you could just sense it in the room. I love to just stand in the back, especially at like the end of sermons and into the worship. I just pray, God, what are you doing in our church? What do we, how do we shepherd? What do people need to hear? But you just feel, and I've felt these last few weeks, really every weekend of January so far, this just like new excitement of, we don't want to just talk about this, we want to do it. And it's happening. Yeah. And it's really beautiful.
I think there's, in this move of God that we're in right now, once you guys watch Jesus Revolution, we'll talk about that movie. But it feels so similar. But there's kind of this indisputable faith that's built out of a time like that for people. There's always gonna be people with skeptic type, whatever questions and all that. But I think God is gonna move in signs and wonders and miracles in a way that it's kind of like, hey man, I know you don't believe that God's out there, but doctors have no explanation for my 9-year-old nephew right now of why he doesn't have kidney disease anymore. Like, I just think there's going to be more of God revealing himself out in the forefront, like where people are kind of like, you got to decide what to do with this. You have to make a decision because this is that's how really the book of Acts kind of begins, is Peter and John heal that guy outside the temple. And what does everyone do with that? Because it's not this, some called him a sorcerer or a guy utilizing demons named Jesus, that people had all their theories about how he was doing what he was doing. They know these were just fishermen a few years ago that have no spiritual authority. They were not trained in this. Who are they? And how did those two ordinary guys just pray for this guy in the name of Jesus and he's suddenly healed? And it throws an uproar. Like everyone has to do something. The Pharisees double down, unfortunately, and try to go stop them because they realize this movement's getting out of our control. And eventually Rome can't control it. And it starts with just God showing up in a way that everyone's like, well, this isn't like theory anymore. This is reality. I think we're going to see more of that. I want to just have more miracle stories and things to tell of just God showing himself. There was a lady who came up so casually in the lobby after, and she's like, man, that testimony just hit me. And I walked in here, I struggle with anxiety, just walked in here feeling so anxious. And at the end when we were praying, she's like, like my chest, it was gone. Like I just felt the anxiety leave today. And I don't know what happened the next day, but I just know that like God is physically, tangibly moving in a really special, unique way in our world right now.
It's real.
And we're going to get to experience so much of it. And I just wanted to invite our church into being a part of that harvest.
Yeah, and everyone's welcome. And you don't have to be like some professional Christian to experience it. God's just that good. In fact, the whole story is the most unlikely candidates having their numbers called, which is something we've always resonated with. But it's also true for anyone listening, anybody watching. Like this year, you can step into the more that God has for you. If you are ready, God's ready. And so let's go.
Let me ask you one last question, and we'll call it a day. In the midst of this winter storm, get home safely, right? For someone that goes, I really want to do that. I want to go make disciples. What are some practical ways that have been helpful for you, especially coming from someone who isn't naturally maybe going to walk in somewhere and just be like, let me talk to everybody in this room. What are some practical ways you've seen God use you to make disciples or decisions you've made that have been helpful in those journeys?
Good. I'm a quality over quantity guy, which is just my personality. But I see Jesus picking 12 instead of trying to have hundreds. And there were the secondary, like 72, and then there were the crowds that followed.
But even within the 12 was 3.
Even within the 12, there was 3. And so 3's always been like a good number for me. One of the things I'm always asking myself is who are the 3 for me that I'm really pouring the most amount of time into. It's looked very different over the years. It used to just be like, okay, I'm working at this gym. And so who are 3 people that work out at this gym, all the way to now it's like there's a church with a whole lot of people and a whole lot of high level leaders and a whole bunch of staff and all of that. And so I think the starting point, and this might be a really good exercise, is open your journal and draw 3 blank lines. And then at the top, just write, who am I discipling in 2025? And then just sit for a few minutes and be silent and be still and see if the Lord brings somebody to mind. It's a coworker or it's a neighbor or it's just like a good friend or a teammate or whoever. And then you don't have to start from this, like, don't get weird about it. Like, hey, so I'm going to disciple you, just go, hey, would love to go get coffee. If you have time. And then while you're having coffee, I usually start from like, here's the stuff that I'm trying to do in my life this year. And I would love some accountability. Wondering, and there's zero pressure here, but wondering if you'd like to be in on this with me this year, where we're going back and forth. Maybe we're reading a book together, or we're reading a book of the Bible, or just another book, and we're texting each other once a week, or we're checking in with each other. And then I just find really like natural ways to get in it. And then I don't try to be someone I'm not. So then I don't try to replicate that 28 times. Because if I do, I won't be present for the few that I am. And over the years, I've just gotten really good at recognizing like, oh, there's a reason God put that person in my life. So let's go. So that's from an introvert's perspective. Do you have a very different approach?
I think it's, as you pray that prayer, it starts to become obvious. You'll just be kind of like, that person just keeps on reaching out to me, or I keep seeing that person, or when our group of friends is together, I feel like we just get into conversations all the time. I think God will just illuminate that. I think it's important to remember, like, making a disciple is a whole long process, and you may be a part of that portion of that journey, or you may be the person that kind of walks alongside them their whole life. But what is the part that you are called to play in their life right now?
Mm.
For some people, like you might be making a disciple of someone who doesn't believe in Jesus right now.
Yeah.
So it might be years before they get baptized. I talked to a guy who's in FCA. So he's doing like teenage ministry. I'm like, dude, that is the hardest ministry because you see very little fruit. It's very, very few times that a teenager is going to come to you and go, I finally got it. And I've changed it's going to be, you're just every day. It's like you wake up again tired and you go plant more seeds. And then you just sit there and know it's going to be a long time before those bloom, before anything grows out of that, before there's a harvest here. You may be planting seeds. That may be your part of making a disciple out of that person. You may only be in their life for 6 months, but by sharing the love of Jesus with them, by being upfront in conversations about who Jesus is and his love for them, you have a chance to be a part of making them into a disciple. And then one other thing I just say as an encouragement to people that are trying and it's hard, like if you lead a group or there's a couple of people in your life that you keep trying and it's like, gosh, it's like a week they're into it and we'll do this reading together or whatever, we'll have good conversations and then they kind of go back and they don't know if they care anymore. Don't measure your relationship or obedience to God on the behavior of the person you're trying to disciple. Mm. There were times with our freshman small group where a guy would show up and be a mess and I'd feel like, oh my gosh, like I'm not doing enough. It's like, no, he's a human. He's going to make mistakes and he's grappling here. You are here as a stable place to keep helping him come back to his identity. But you're not a complete failure if somebody in your life doesn't just get it. If they don't sign up to get baptized this semester, or they don't just put their faith in Jesus after one captivating conversation with you, or they stumble and fall back into an old sin, old habit, right when it felt like things were going great. Don't feel like you've failed. Just understand that's part of this messy journey. And if you need to look to someone, look to Jesus, who obviously had his disciples. If Jesus' disciples all failed him, then who are we to expect that the people that we're trying to make into disciples are going to get it all right the first time?
You see this sweet surrender. I see this sweet surrender in Jesus every time I read the Gospels, because that's a hard one for me. It's hard for me to let go of that. You just see you feel like he was so surrendered from the outcome.
Yeah.
That he would be like, I'm going to teach this, and if you have ears to hear it, great.
Yeah.
And then he would just be like, hey, let's go get some dinner.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he cared deeply about people.
Yeah.
Enough to like tell them these hard truths, but you don't see him like spiraling.
No.
Because of that.
And that's why he was upfront about the price you pay, where it was like, I'm not going to coerce you into this.
Right.
I'm not going to make you follow me.
Right.
I want you to choose it because it's going to be quite a road. It's going to be a very different life than what you're in right now or what you could get from the patterns of this world. You're invited, but I want you to choose it because it's going to take you to some places that are not in your current plans. And that is true in our lives in a lot of good ways and a lot of hard ways, but it's all been worth it. And
100%.
Concluding all this week, which has been really powerful, really heavy, really impactful, it all brought me back ultimately to the love of Jesus, to go back to sitting in my car, feeling like this anguish as a pastor that I see so much in the guys in the Bible of like, oh God, I want everyone to care about this. I want this to be everything for everyone, and for everyone to go all in and everyone to understand how you feel about them and what you've done for them. I stopped and I was like, Jesus, I can't imagine how you felt. You know, like you literally gave your life up and you, with no have to, sinless. You gave your life up out of love for people, knowing that so many of them, millions of them would never care, would make fun of you, would mock what you've done, would mock who you were, who you are. I can't imagine the pain that would feel like, but the love that overshadowed that to go, you know what? Even though there will be people that never care, even the guys that I have been discipling for 3 years are all nowhere to be found right now, except for John. Make sure to let you know that.
He is the disciple that Jesus loved.
Even though my guys have abandoned me and all of these people don't care and these people want to kill me, I choose this because I love you that much. That's what blows my mind. In Romans, Paul says, you know, maybe for a good man, people might die. And I always kind of read that thinking of him using the disciples as an example of like, they're martyrs for a reason, but I realize what he's actually saying is the crazy part's not the people that died for Jesus. The crazy part is that Jesus died for people. And that absolutely blows my mind. And that, when I get back to the core of this and then the mission of what he's invited us into, it just makes me want to throw everything else and just go, guys, this is why we're here. Life is short. We just experienced a reminder of that all over again. Yeah. Heaven is real. Hell is real. We've got an eternity to fight for in the lives of people. So let's take up his spirit and mission and let's go live the abundant life and mission of Jesus.
That's it, man. Amen.
Amen.